Welcome back, everybody. Rich here. This is Richard White Global, where we get into the past to understand the present. Today's topic: Confederate States of America holidays. Do they really still exist in 2026? Well, the short answer is yes, absolutely, in many states and in many different forms. Now, as a Northerner, that may surprise you or even shock you. It's not something we were ever taught in school. You would assume, no, that's not possible. I mean, they lost the war. They were the bad guys from the Northern perspective. Well, let's get some facts for this context. The Confederate States of America officially existed from 1861 until 1865. But from the United States government perspective, the Confederate States of America, better known as the CSA, never existed. Why is that? Well, from the United States government perspective, they committed treason. And Article 3, Section 3 agrees with that. It clearly states that waging war against the United States is treason. Furthermore, they were just a de facto government. Even the Confederacy only claimed to be provisional from 1861 until 1862. They didn't even consider themselves a permanent government until 1862, until their demise in 1865. Furthermore, they were never recognized internationally as a country, even though they had a currency, a constitution, and other, quote, founding documents very similar to the United States. And then in April 12th, 1865, 4 years after the Civil War ended, Article 4 of the Constitution had a ruling from the Supreme Court on the admissions clause, which clearly states that you can be admitted, but there is no leave or secession clause. So the statehood ruling was interpreted simply as a door that swings in, but not out. Admission is final. So what types of Confederate holidays are there still currently? Well, there are two different types. There are legal holidays, which are mostly ceremonial in nature for remembrance, but they don't have any paid time off. I would consider them, quote, calendar holidays. I guess good examples would be Groundhog Day, Halloween, you get it, etc. And then there are official federal and state taxpayer-funded days off. But for the context of this video, we'll just focus on state taxpayer-funded holidays because no federal tax dollars are given for time off for, quote, Confederate state holidays. So what are they? Where are they? And when are they? Now, some of these dates vary from time to time and month to month, but for the most part, they're pretty similar. So currently, Alabama, Mississippi, South Carolina, Texas, Georgia, Florida, and North Carolina all legally recognize the Confederate Memorial Day, which is typically celebrated in April to May-ish, depending on which state you're in. Now, what's the differences? Well, the two caveats are, in Florida and North Carolina, they are against two state legal holidays celebrating Confederate Memorial Day. The difference is they do not close government offices for those, so you're really not getting time off. The one oddity I found is that Alabama still celebrates on June 1st President Jefferson Davis's birthday. Yes, it's still a legally state-paid day off holiday. And then in Georgia, they used to celebrate Robert E. Lee's birthday legally in the month of January, which coincides very similarly with Martin Luther King Day. So in 2015, it was just renamed, quote, state holiday. Read between the lines on whatever you want to make of that. But from what I've researched, it seems like it was pretty much a political compromise. Again, it's just called a state holiday, not Robert E. Lee's birthday any longer. So July 4th is our Independence Day in the United States, obviously. So what about Confederate States of America Independence Day? Yeah, they had one. Unofficially, it was February 22nd. They also called it Founding Day, which coincided with the inauguration day of Confederate States of America President Jefferson Davis, the one and only, obviously. Again, that is no longer observed or recognized in any state that I could find. It's pretty much just celebrated as Washington's birthday since it's around the exact same time. So let's get into the question of why. Well, from the Southern perspective, it's fairly easy. Again, you had their heritage. You do want to remember their soldiers and sailors and their, again, heritage from that time. Also, there is some political compromise and legally agreed upon holidays. Again, that just ties into the political compromise of the former Confederate States. But there again, they have the legal right because it is a state's right to determine which state holidays they observe and celebrate. Not federal, but state. So there again, it's their state taxpayers for this, not federal tax dollars used. So another question I'd like to ask is, well, should they exist? Again, as a Northerner, a Federal, or a Billy Yank, as they were called during the Civil War, you would say, well, absolutely not. Why would they? I mean, after all, they legally committed treason. They tore the country apart. They did have a slave-based society. And again, they never existed from the United States perspective. Okay, let's go down south. Let's look at it from their perspective as a Southerner, a Confederate, a rebel, Johnny Reb, as they were known. They may come in and say, well, we should exist with these holidays because we were oppressed. We absolutely were invaded because they called it the War of Northern Aggression. They did have states' rights, and again, their heritage. So there are some justifications I can see on both sides, so I guess that's up to each person's perspective. So in closing, I'd like to ask this to ponder. Do they exist? Well, that's the obvious answer. We already know. Yes, they do in some limited states and forms. Again, should they exist? I'm divided on that. I'll leave that up to you to decide. Will they exist? In my opinion, time and politics will decide that. Some of these holidays in these states have faded away already with time and politics. Some have been renamed or done away with or compromised again. Until next time, I'm Rich, and this is Richard White Global. Please like, comment, and subscribe.